these are the pages. When Ben asked me to do this, because I was thinking I was planning to learn my poems, but I didn't have time. So, and maybe it's appropriate. I'm going to read 3 poems. The first is, I don't know if anyone knows the film Flash Gordon from 1980. Yeah, it's quite an important film for me growing up. Didn't have very many East Asian role models on screen. There was this character called Ming the Merciless. And he wasn't like many of my mum's family in lots of ways. He was like the despotic ruler of this planet called Planet Mongo. And he wore these big red robes and he had weird facial hair and strange eyebrows. And I was still kind of disappointed when I learned he was played by this actor called Max von Sydow. That doesn't sound right. But this was a poem I then wrote about Ming, and it's called Pathetic Earthlings. Planet Mongo is underdeveloped in certain respects. Most of its terrain is purple rock, but they do have hovercrafts and telepathy. So while you're flying from the Imperial Palace to visit your cousin beyond the purple rocks and the ice mound they call Phrygia, you can put a plastic halo over your head and think to your cousin, as the Mongo people say, and be talking to him as if you were inside each other's head or on hands-free. Though impressive technologically, this has one defect. You can't refuse to take a telepathic call. Suddenly, you're inside their head, and they're inside of yours, and what if your cousin is in a bad mood, or having sex with his wife or another woman, or masturbating over something terrible? I have a cousin called Ming, and people say I look like him, which is uncomfortable because, though he may not be evil, he's done bad things. When I tell people this and say his name is Ming, they laugh because I assume it's such an evil-sounding name. Ming doesn't wear red suits trimmed with gold, isn't bald, and doesn't have facial hair like a court jester's parted legs. But sometimes, that's how I think of him too. And if even I can't help thinking of him like that, then maybe he couldn't help becoming kind of evil over time. I think to him, my hovercraft skimming over the purple wastes of planet Mongo, and enter his consciousness just as he sits down on the toilet, malaria-obsessed, the only decoration in his bathroom, a picture of his daughter he can't look at now without crying, wondering when it was his life turned so thoroughly fucking evil. He didn't start out wanting to be rich and powerful, or to sleep with anyone other than his wife, necessarily. I could be thinking to him more mercy than he would himself allow. We haven't spoken in 9 years. Perhaps, like Emperor Ming, he's only sitting in his version of a palace, eyebrows arched, tormenting pathetic earthlings. I think to him. I really do. But you can never be certain whose head you're really in. I thought as it was National Poetry Day, I'd read one poem by a poet who isn't me, a real poet, a guy called W.S. Graham, who was born over 100 years ago in Scotland, lived in poverty in Cornwall, no running water, no electricity, but he became kind of famous near the end of his career. And this is one of his later poems. It's called The Constructed Space. And I think it's one of those poems I return to when I kind of want to be reminded of why poetry matters. It feels like it's a poem about language, about communicating with someone, so therefore a poem about love, and also a poem about politics, which is also about that. The constructed space. Meanwhile, surely there must be something to say. Maybe not suitable, but at least happy, in a sense, here between us two, whoever we are. Anyhow, here we are, and never before have we two faced each other, who face each other now across this abstract scene stretching between us. This is a public place, achieved against subjective odds, and then mainly an obstacle to what I mean. It is like that, remember. It is like that very often at the beginning till we are met by some intention risen up out of nothing. And even then, We know what we are saying only when it is said and fixed and dead. Or maybe, surely, of course, we never know what we have said, what lonely meanings are read into the space we make, and yet I say this silence here, for in it I might hear you. I say this silence, or better, construct this space, so that somehow something may pass across the court habits of language to you and me. From where we are, it is not us we see, and times are hastening, yet disguise is mortal. The times continually disclose our home. Here in the present tense, disguise is mortal. The trying times are hastening, yet here I am. More truly now, this abstract act become. So that was Douglas Graham. I'm going to read one last poem, which is from my book. It's kind of come near the end. It's kind of my London poem. It's about growing up in London and this weird thing you have there of, if you spend your whole life there, of being very continually connected, of always being connected to every place you've ever known, but also being quite distant from it. Like when I say places, I kind of mean my parents. You know, I could, but anyway, it'll come to it. And it's also kind of about poems. It's called Half Got Out. I was reading a poem by Ben Jonson, where a newborn, half got out, sees the city burning, and decides to crawl back into his mother's womb. Thine urn, he calls it. It was Tuesday morning. I'd just seen Leo near Leicester Square. He was reading a book by W.S. Merwin, a poet himself newly returned to his dead mother's womb. I was feeling so anxious, Leo said. Kind of low. When I started to read him, it felt like I found him at just the right time. I'm not sure, but don't parents always talk about their kids arriving at just the right time? Like you might describe finding your flip-flops just before a beach holiday. Yes, I said to Leo. He wrote that poem, didn't he? The sad dad one that starts, my friend says, I was not a good son, you understand? I say, yes, I understand. He says, I did not go to see my parents very often, you know. And I say, yes, I know. I love the way the dialogue loops back in on itself, the way you know the poet is really talking to or about themselves. It hurts to read it. It reminds me I could be seeing my parents right now who live 10 stops away. Yes, half an hour. But I'm not. And what else am I not doing? You have to work though. You have to make a living, don't you? That may be true, I don't know. I left the library in light rain to meet Sophie for a drink at the Chandos. And she told me her granddad used to go to Richmond Park to fish. He was a wireless operating sergeant during the war. It's not like she cares, it's just funny, you know. Even if she had a Victoria Cross taped to her forehead, it wouldn't stop those dickheads at the bar from asking if she's Latina or something. I just fucking hate this city, you understand? I said, yes, I understand. But I don't know how to leave it. I said, yes, I know, sorry, I don't know how to leave or where I'd even go. I looped back to enter the tube at Leicester Square, stepping over the body of a homeless man, to travel further again from my mother's womb to Turnpike Lane. The word interred echoing in my head. How many acres of earth were there above me then? The whole city might have been burning. I could already have been dead. There's no going back, my dad said. But how many times have I crossed the point of no return, only to crawl back down King Street or Goldhawk Road to eat chicken noodle soup and talk about seat cushions from Lidl? Yes, I know they're good value. Thank you for dinner. Thank you. Half got out and half in wound. I know that's just the way it is. I understand the tube threading me like a complex stitch beneath and through the city, back to the house we've been sharing lately. When I got in, I said, I'm home. And you said, yes, I know. And then you filled the kettle and sat down next to me and said,